housekeeping that I will repeat as we're letting people join. But just to let you know that your microphones, cameras, and chat function have been disabled for this webinar, but the Q&A function is live. Please can you use that to ask your questions, and please do use it to ask your questions, because we really want to get those questions in. The slides and a recording of this session will be shared following the webinar, so you will get this to follow through. And also, in terms of the questions, what we want to try and do is make sure we make this session as useful for as many people as possible. So we're going to really try and focus on the kind of like the general questions that are going to be really useful to the majority of people. If you have a specific question, then please do still put that in the Q&A. But it may be that if your question is really specific, we will take that away and ask the team whether or not we can come back to you with an answer in the follow-up. That way they've got the time to process to make sure that they answer the question properly and not just give an answer on the hoof. But it also means that, you know, we don't go to focus into too much detail, which isn't as relevant for everybody. So I can still see there's loads of people popping in, so that's absolutely brilliant. It's very exciting to have so many people joining us. Just to reiterate, in terms of housekeeping, we are keeping everybody's microphones, cameras, and chat function disabled, so we don't get the kind of like unnecessary background noise. But the Q&A function is live, and we would really like you to use that for your questions. So one of the questions that always gets asked, yes, the slides will be available and a recording of the session will be shared following the webinar. We will make sure that goes out to everybody who's registered. If at any point the slides or sound are not working for you, then it is probably best to leave and re-enter to see if that rectifies the situation. But hopefully that won't be a problem. And as I say, there will be questions at the end of the session. What we really want to do is to make the questions and answers as useful for as many of you as possible. You've all given your time for this, and we want to make it really useful for all of you. So we will probably be highlighting some of the kind of like the themes that come through in the questions, or the kind of like the broad questions that will have most relevance to most people. But that doesn't mean to say if you've got a specific question, we still want to know what that question is. So please do ask any questions, and we will do our best to answer them. And it may be that we take those questions away and we answer them in a follow-up, or we signpost to you where you can find the answers to those questions. But please do ask questions. The whole purpose of this session is to try and help people to understand what's going on. So yeah, ask away, and we will try and do a quick fire question and answer at the end of the presentation, so that we get the best answers to the questions that you guys are asking. Right, we are.
Yeah, I think you can probably make a start now if you like.
Brilliant. Okay. So while that's going on, I just wanted to say hello and welcome. So I'm Jude Allan. I'm the Interim MD at OPRL, and we're all about consumer communication to enable action and making things as accessible as possible for our members and for anybody else, really. And as part of that, we've been out and about sharing what's happening with EPR in as relevant and as user-friendly way as possible. I had the pleasure of speaking at the BCMPA conference in July, so that's contract manufacturers and co-packers, and that's an audience that taps into the small producer category for EPR, also an audience that has been really focused on the day-to-day challenges of surviving and growing. So welcome to any of the BCMPA members that have joined us today. There were a number of questions that came up at that webinar, that event rather, that I followed up with Peter at DEFRA, and we thought it would be a really good idea to host a webinar that focuses in on those small producers, so that you could really understand, and you can understand from DEFRA rather than me doing an interpretation of what DEFRA is saying, of who small producers are. If you are a small producer, what does that mean? So I've got three brilliant speakers for you today. We've got Peter Collins and Mark Simmons from DEFRA, who are very much focusing on the data side of things, and Virginia Woolley from the Environment Agency. So we've got DEFRA about kind of like what the rules are and what the enforcement is about, and how we make that all work for you. So they're going to talk to you about EPR, the packaging in general, and then focus in on data reporting, because that is the most urgent, the most urgent thing in terms of the date for data reporting. So I can still see some people coming in, so I'm just going to kind of keep going a little bit and repeat what I said in the welcome. The chat function, cameras, microphones have been disabled for the webinar, as is pretty normal, really. But the Q&A function is open. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll answer as many as we can. But this webinar is to try and make it as accessible and useful and beneficial to as many people as possible. So what we're going to try and do is make sure we focus on the kind of like the general broad questions that give as much, the answers will give as much benefit to as many people as possible. If you've got specific questions, then please also put them in, but we probably won't get to them in this session. But we will take them away and we will follow up afterwards. So please do just submit whatever questions you have, and we'll do our best. I've got myself and Alice Harlock, who's our Director of Technical and Member Services, are going to be trying to get the questions as kind of like as precise as possible, so we can do a quick fire question and answer session after the presentation, so that we can really kind of like get the best knowledge and the best use of Peter, Mark and Virginia's time. So I think we've almost stabilized in terms of the number of people joining. So Peter, I'm going to hand over to you, if that's okay, and let you talk about EPR.
Thank you very much, Jude, and thank you very much for that introduction as well. So my name is Peter Collins. I'm the head of digital for the collection and packaging reforms within DEFRA. So my team is responsible for building and operating the digital services to make the reforms work, including the report packaging data service that many of you will have been using to submit data for 2023. I'm going to give a very, very brief overview of EPR. I'm assuming most people are aware of what it is, but it's always good to kind of go back to the basics. And then I'll be handing to Mark Simmons to talk through what it is you actually have to do in a lot more detail. But if we can have the next slide, please. I think you've done a wonderful intro for us, Jude, so we'll skip straight on through. And then on to the next one as well, please. Perfect. So EPR, what is it? At its core, it's an extension of the existing system around producer responsibility, and we're making producer packaging responsible for managing the full net cost of packaging when it becomes waste, starting with household waste. This is heavily reliant on data. So to understand what a producer's obligation will be, it's tied to the data that they report. Throughout 2023, you would have been collecting reporting data with the deadline after the regulatory position statement from the regulators, the 31st of May. And then throughout 2024, you should have been collecting data again, where for some producers, the deadline to submit will be the 1st of October, so about 4 weeks away. If we can go to the next slide, please. So there are 3 categories of producers under the extended producer responsibility regulations. The low category, or the small category, is for those who have no obligation at all. And this is for companies who supply less than 25 tonnes of packaging each year, or who have turnover of less than £1 million per year. They will remain unobligated, as they have under the old regulations. We then have what we term the large producer category, although that can be slightly misleading because depending on your organisation, 50 tonnes of packaging may or may not feel like large. So there is very definitely a small large producer group. But these are companies that have a turnover of at least £2 million per year and who handle at least 50 tonnes of packaging per year. These companies are obligated to report data twice per year, so they have the deadline of the 1st of October to make their report for the first 6 months of 2024, and will then have to do a second report of packaging data by the 1st of April next year. And these are companies that will also have recycling and disposal cost obligations. They'll need to buy PRNs in 2025 to meet obligations based on the 2024 data, and they'll be required to pay disposal costs to the scheme administrator to cover the cost of local authorities handling household packaging waste. There's then a new category in the middle, which is what we term small producers, and these are companies that supply at least 25 tonnes of packaging but have a turnover between £1 and £2 million, or who have a turnover of at least £1 million but supply between 25 and 50 tonnes of packaging. For these companies, they only have to make one report per year, and it's a full 12-month report. Their first report is due on the 1st of April, or by the 1st of April 2025. But throughout 2024, they should be collecting their data as they will need it to make their report next year. Where these reports are made is on the Report Packaging Data, or RPD, digital service, which is available on gov.uk. And to do so, you'll need to have an account with what's called an approved person, so a named person in the company who is legally responsible for making that report. If we can go on to the next slide, please. In terms of why we're getting this in, the data itself is really, really important, and it's not just to drive obligations next year. I'm sure many people on the webinar will be aware that we, a few weeks ago, published what we termed indicative base fees, which is the indicative of what the disposal fees will be for next year. These are due to be refined over the coming months based on data being reported. So there's due to be a follow-up publication in September based on data reported for 2023, and then be further publications based on data for 2024 to get it as accurate as possible in advance of invoices next year. Therefore, the earlier you get the data in, the more likely it is that we'll be able to give more accurate indicative fees going forwards. If we then move on to the next slide. And I think this is where I hand to Mark, and I let the experts talk you through what it is you have to do and how you will do it. So Mark, I'm going to hand to you.
Thanks, Peter. My name's Mark Simmons, and I'm the Deputy Service Owner for Report Packaging Data in plainer English. That's the widget online on gov.uk that you'll interact with to submit your packaging data. If I could have the next slide, please. So Peter's just called out a little bit about the obligations of a producer. So if you're obligated, you need to report your packaging data to the regulator. And as Peter said, you do that by creating an account on RPD and enrolling as a producer. You can use that account to then tell us about your organisation details, your packaging data, and tell us, crucially, if you're working with a compliance scheme. If you're working with a compliance scheme, they will handle all of that data reporting element for you. If you're handling your own packaging, if you are doing this on your own behalf, once you've enrolled on RPD, you need to submit your organisation details. That will include things like your address, your packaging activities, the people who will be verifying and submitting your data. But you also need to report additional details potentially for your organisation, such as brand information or partner information, if that applies to you. That will be done in what we call a CSV file, and it's done for the large producer group. So that bottom right-hand corner in dark green that Peter alluded to on his slide, where you have the higher tonnage and higher turnover limits. You do that every 6 months. I'll talk a little bit more about reporting schedule for small producers as well. They submit their data annually, and the first time small producers, so that's the light green area, and we will be sending these slides out. They will be they'll have to report every year from January to December, and they'll do that the following April. So the first report there will be due on the no later than the 1st of April 2025. Could I have the next slide, please? I'm going to talk you through next how to collect and report your packaging data. This is quite detailed, so it depends how closely involved you are with your own company around the reporting of data under previous regimes. as to how easy you'll find this to understand. I would strongly encourage everybody to look at and we'll send some links out on a fact sheet at the end. But just to look at the guidance, you can understand whether the regulations apply to you. And then there's a very, very detailed guidance on how you would collect your data. And if I could have the next slide, please. So your packaging data submission needs to include the following information. So this is what we call the packaging file, the placed on market packaging file. This is what contains the tonnage and the types of things that you need to report. So you need to have your packaging activity. That's how the packaging was supplied. The packaging type, and I'll go through these in a little bit more detail. But for example, if that's household or non-household, the packaging class, which is whether it's classified as primary, secondary, shipment or tertiary packaging. And finally, the packaging material and weight. And again, there's a really detailed description of all of those categories on gov.uk. I would urge you to have a little look through that. And I'm going to go on to present some information today that drills into that a little bit and gives you some examples. The format for uploading that data is in a .csv file, and you'll be able to report this directly through RPD. So it's thinking about that report packaging data service as a kind of interface where you can discharge your legal responsibilities and directly present to the regulator the information that you're required by law to do so. If I could have the next slide, please. Sorry, my screen's taken a moment to catch up there. So there's a number of different producer types depending on the activity that a business will undertake. So whether that's supplied under your own brand, so that's businesses who either put goods into packaging or have goods put into packaging and place those goods on the UK market under their own brand. So an example of that would be a retailer like Tesco. Packed or filled, so that is kind of businesses in relation to any filled packaging who put goods into packaging for which there is no brand owner. Yeah, so that producer carries out the same obligation as the brand owner. Imported, or as a first UK owner, that's a business who are responsible for the import of filled packaging into the UK for sale. So where the importer is not based in the UK, it will be the first UK-based owner of the packaging that takes this obligation. And if I can have the next slide, please. So the next category we've got here is hired or loaned. So these are businesses who supply reusable packaging to a user of that packaging, where the supply is made by hiring out or lending the packaging. So for an example, those CHEP blue pallets, which we all see, supplied as empty is a business who sell unfilled packaging to producers who are below the producer obligation threshold and take on the obligation for that packaging. So again, in this industry example of that would be Sonoco, who sell empty cups to small independent shops. That would be supplying as empty. Supplied through an online marketplace that you own. So a business based in the UK who operates a website or any other means by which information is made available over the internet, through which persons based outside of the UK other than the operator are able to offer filled packaging for sale in the UK, whether or not the operator does so. For examples there are things like eBay or Amazon. Yeah, and it is, remember, possible for a single business or organisation to have more than one producer type. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about packaging types. So organisations who will also need to report the type of packaging you supply or import and which of the following categories your packaging is classed as. So whether that's household, both primary and shipment packaging could be classed as household packaging, for instance, or if you supply either primary or shipment packaging to a business which supplies it onto another business or an end consumer with any packaging included, all packaging will be mentioned as household packaging. For example, you may supply packaging to a business through a third party, such as a distributor or wholesale. Be aware as well, this guidance has changed a little bit in 2024. we do get into some of the weeds here and some of the complexity, but I would urge everybody to remind themselves of the definitions here that have changed for 2024 data reporting, which is of course the year that we're in now. So if you're for instance, if you are supplying a product that's designed for business or public institution use only, and its packaging is likely to end up in non-household bins, then you may also report the primary and shipment packaging as non-household, even if not supplied directly to the business end user. Again, just a plea from us to have a good look at the guidance, because there are some subtleties that have changed for 2024. I'll move on to non-households. So both secondary and tertiary packaging can be classed as non-household packaging. Should also class primary or shipment packaging as non-household packaging if you supply it to a business which is either of the following. So either the end consumer of the goods contained in the packaging, or an organisation that supplies the goods to an end consumer with all of the packaging removed. You need to be able to show evidence of this. If you cannot, you've got to class that packaging as household. Just talk a little bit about packaging type that commonly ends up in public bins. So you've got to submit data about the material and weight of household packaging that commonly ends up in public bins. To do this, you should collect data about any of the packaging in the list of items that commonly end up in public bins. That list is available on gov.uk. It's, and again, part of our guidance suite, so everything's in the same place here for you guys. There are some examples that would include things like confectionery wrappers, crisp packets, takeaway food containers, small drinks cartons. For any packaging in this category, you only need to report it in this category. You do not need to report it as household packaging as well. I'm going to labour through the rest of these. I'm conscious this is quite detailed. So if it is a drinks container, you should report single-use drinks containers that you supply, and you should report both the total weight and the number of units you've supplied. This includes bottles and drinks cans that are made of PET plastic, glass, steel, or aluminium. You only need to report this for drinks containers you've supplied in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Although from 2024, you need to report this data from Scotland as well. If it's reusable, you only need to report packaging that's designed to be reused the first time that it's supplied, and you should report it split into two categories, either reusable packaging, that's primary packaging, or reusable packaging, that is secondary packaging. As well as reporting that in this category, in this separate category, you should also make sure any reusable packaging is included in the household and non-household packaging that you report. I'll move on to consumer waste. This is waste that you collect perhaps through a front of store take back scheme. There are two types of self-managed consumer waste. So recovered packaging waste that's not commonly collected by local authorities, or reusable packaging waste that has been reused at least once, and they are separate types of packaging. Organisation waste, which you probably know as referred into the industry as backhaul waste. This is where your organisation recovers packaging waste, your own packaging waste, and from consumers. That is commonly collected by local authorities. So things like aerosols, food pots and tubs, cardboard products. There's again a full list of these products and how they vary across the different UK nations. If you're a large organisation, self-managed consumer waste you report may be used to offset packaging. So if you're responsible for disposal costs, it can offset packaging you've reported as household packaging. This will obviously reduce your waste management fee. It's just to say that I'm conscious how detailed all of that is. There is a lot of nuance in how you report your packaging type. Strongly advise you to visit the gov.uk guidance. It is extensive to understand the different rules around how you report your packaging data. There's a link there on the screen, but I say we will send out both the slides and a pack of useful links post presentation. If we could have the next slide, please. So packaging is defined as products made of any materials which are used for the containment, protection, handling, delivery, and presentation of goods from the producer to the user or the consumer. This literally includes anything that's designed to be filled at the point of sale. There are also different types of packaging. So we classify them as primary, secondary, shipment, and transit. So primary packaging is the packaging that is in direct contact with the product. It constitutes a sales unit to the final user or consumer at the point of purchase. Secondary is defined as it's used to group several individual sales units together for selling or shipping purposes. And I'm going to go through some examples of these on the next slides. Shipment packaging is any packaging added to primary packaging for shipping single or multiple sales units which have been purchased online or by mail order to customers. Finally, tertiary packaging or transit packaging is used to group secondary packaging units together to facilitate their transport and to protect them while being transported or handled. Again, there are some changes to the shipment packaging definition highlighted in the recent DEFRA newsletter. We will send you a link out to that as well. As ever, when we start to operate regs, we understand nuances in them and ways of reporting data more accurately. If I could have the next slide, please. I'm hoping these slides aren't going to be quite as detail heavy for you. We've included some pretty pictures to try and visualize the examples that we're talking about. So primary packaging is the packaging that we said was in direct contact with the product. It constitutes a sales unit to sell to customers. So a nice Napolina cannelloni beans here, steel can containing the beans. It's got beans, a steel can and a paper label. The primary packaging would be the steel can with a paper label. And next slide, please. We're going to expand that same example into secondary packaging. So remember, that's used to group several individual sales units together for selling or shipping purposes. So this example will be 24 tins of beans in a cardboard box. So you've got beans, 24 cans, a paper label on each can, all placed in a cardboard box. So in this example, the secondary packaging would be the cardboard box. If I can have the next slide, please. Switching up our examples a little bit here, this is a mobile phone. So remember, shipment packaging is any packaging added to primary packaging for shipping single or multiple sales units to businesses or consumers. So the example here is if you had a mobile phone in a cardboard box and then placed the box into a mail bag before shipping, the shipment packaging would be the mail bag. And if I can have the next slide, please. Stock photo of being out and about in a warehouse here for this one. So tertiary or transit packaging is used to group secondary packaging units together to facilitate their transport and to protect them while being transported or handled. The transit package does not include road, rail, ship, and air containers. So in this example, if secondary packaging units are placed into larger cardboard boxes that are sealed with parcel tape and then put onto wooden pallets to be transported, the transit packaging would be the cardboard box, the parcel tape, and the wooden pallet. So we've looked at the different types of packaging and a few examples. We're now going to have a little look at materials types, if we could have the next slide. So after you've categorized your data into the relevant packaging activities, you must report the weight of these individual items. Packaging material should be given in kilograms. Note that's a change from the tonnage system under the last regs. And you should report your data in the following categories. So the categories are aluminium, fiber-based composite material, glass, paper or cardboard, plastic, steel, wood, and then we've got another category for other. The other includes any material that you use that are not listed here. I've seen some weird and wonderful ones when I've been out visiting colleagues in warehouses. There can be things like rubber, silicone, or ceramics. There's a free text box there that's available in your submission to confirm what materials are included with your other packaging. So just to add, composite packaging is made up of 2 or more layers. We've had quite a few questions on composite packaging. Composite packaging is made up of 2 or more layers of different materials that cannot be separated by hand. So For composite packaging, you should report the full weight of the packaging and report it categorized by the main material of that total weight. For example, crisp packets that contain plastic and foil, the main material is plastic, so you should report that as plastic. If we can have the next slide, please. And the next one, please. Thanks, Jude. So how do you do all this? Once you've collected all this information together, what do you do with it? So to upload your packaging data into the Report Packaging Data Services online, you should have already created an account. So those of you that are classified by DEFRA as large producers will have done all of this already, or you should have, and enrolled as a producer. You should submit then your packaging data in a CSV file. And note, guys, that the deadline for large producers for the H1 cycle, so from January to June for 2024, is imminently on our horizon. We need to have that done by no later than the 1st of October. And obviously the clock is ticking on that. There's guidance on gov.uk to help you do this. If you need help creating a packaging data CSV, you can use, we've got a tool that generates a packaging data file for you. It's got a relatively simple interface, generates the packaging data file, checks how your file should be structured, and you can also use that example. There's an example data file on gov.uk that'll help you understand how to structure your submission. So we've got a worked example there. Again, there's a link on there, but we will send these slides out and we'll make sure that we send our useful links too. If I could have the next slide, please. So we've just got some quick examples of what this looks like in practice. So this is our example. It's a packaging file generator with 2 rows of packaging data that have been complete. Obviously, you need to complete a row for each data item that you have that you need to declare. And row 1 there contains all of the column headings. Again, there's detailed instruction on gov.uk as to how to do this. If we could go on to the next file, I just want to show you an example output. So that's what it looks like if you were to either create your own or you save your output as a CSV. This is what it looks like. Effectively, that goes into our RPD database once you upload that file. So it's an example, really, so you can visualize what it looks like. You have to then upload that into Report Packaging Data. As long as you're satisfied, obviously, it contains all of the packaging data you need to submit to the regulator and that it's as accurate as reasonably possible. Before you make a submission, you have the option to upload it. When you upload it, you can replace that with another one if you think you've made a mistake or you have an addition. And then finally, the approved person would submit that data. Again, ensuring that it is as accurate as reasonably possible. You must notify the relevant regulator when you enroll. If a compliance scheme or delegated person will do this on your behalf. Specifically for compliance scheme, guys, when you go through and enroll as a producer, there's a simple radial box to tick to say that you're using a compliance scheme. You get then to pick the compliance scheme you're using, and that's as much as you need to do until the following year. Obviously, your compliance scheme will then pick up your data reporting for you. And if I could have the next slide, please. So, access and support. We've got a help desk. We've got a dedicated help desk, especially at this time of year as the 1st of October deadline gets busier. I would encourage you to engage with that help desk as soon as you can. There's both a phone number and an email address there. Really important that you meet that deadline. There are penalties, there are potential enforcement actions that regulators can take against you, and I'll leave colleagues from Environment Agency to talk about that more if they wish. But you need to comply with the law. I wouldn't advise leaving this till the last minute. I would make sure that you are engaging with that help desk now. If there are any concerns, anything that you're not sure about, if you can't get your file to upload, please contact them post haste. And if we could have the next slide. I suppose a bit of an intro slide into my handover to my colleague Virginia from the Environment Agency. I just wanted to separate out the help desk. We will help where we can and we'll bus you to the right people where we can. But if you have a question that's not about the IT, if it's wholly about how this system operates, or you know, the operability of the regulations, what constitutes, you know, what kind of things you should be recording and what constitutes the thing, then your individual regulator it's also really important to get in touch with them. We will bus your inquiry to the regulator, but if it is not included, as you know, if the IT issue isn't an issue for you and it's purely about the operation of the regulations, urge you to get into direct contact with your regulator again as soon as possible. I'm going to stop there because I've lathered for ages. I don't know, Jude, if you want to pause now for questions for me, or we want to hand straight to Virginia and then do questions at the end.
I think let's carry on and let Virginia talk, and then we can do questions for both of you together. Thank you.
Great. We'll go on to the next slide then. So yes, I'm Virginia William from the Environment Agency. So I represent the Environmental Regulator of England. So I am just the Environment Agency. There are obviously 4 different regulators in the respective nations. We do work very closely with the other regulators, but as I say, any questions that I answer today, although will probably be similar to what the other regulators will say, or if not the same, I just need to make clear that I am just from the Environment Agency. So the main reason I wanted to come today is that some of you may have submitted 2023 data already. Some of you may not have done, but quite a few of you are probably starting to prepare your 2024 data. And because as the regulators, we have a duty to monitor data that is submitted, we have noticed quite a few common errors that people have made in their 2023 data. So we just want to share these with you so that I can, so that hopefully you can take them into consideration when you're preparing your 2024 data. So we can save a bit of time in terms of our data checking and us having to go back and forth with yourselves, trying to get corrections put in. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So here's a lovely long list. So as Mark said, there are 2 files that you need to, if you're a large producer, there are 2 files that you need to submit every 6 months, which is an organisation information file, and then there's your packaging data file. So this page, in terms of common errors, are things that people have done incorrectly on their organisation data file. So when you do enrol, you'll get an organisation ID. When you then submit your organisation data, you need to make sure there's not a space in the middle. For those who have done this already, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those that haven't done this already, it's a 6-digit org ID, and you just need to make sure there's no space in the middle. That just helps us with our data checks and make sure people are reporting under the correct ID. Again, if you're an organisation that has subsidiaries, you do need to report for your subsidiaries. And so when you enrol, you'll give your subsidiaries a unique name or a unique identifier. And again, you need to make sure you're using the correct subsidiary ID for the data that you're submitting. So please make sure that that all tallies up. Your organisation name, if you are registered on Companies House, if you can make sure that the name actually matches what's on Companies House. So obviously if you're such and such limited, if it's LTD on Companies House, please put LTD as your company's name, organisation name, or if it's limited and it's the full word, please use that. So it is kind of minor things like that, but it creates some problems for us when we're doing the data checking if these things aren't aligned. Again, similar with Companies House number, a lot of companies have a leading 0, and because when you upload your file, it's, as Mark said, it's a CSV file, so similar to like an Excel spreadsheet. When you put the 0, people have been leaving off the 0 and just been putting, say, the 7 digits instead of 8. We need you to put that leading 0 in because it helps with data checks and make sure that we know that you're the correct person or the correct organisation. Home nation code, you need to let us know which UK nation you're registered in. So again, the Environment Agency will deal with English registered producers and compliance schemes, whereas the other regulators will deal with their respective organisations. So it's really important to make sure we know where people are registered. The next one is main activity SIC code. So this is where your SIC code, it must reflect your main packaging activity. So not necessarily your main organisation activity, it's what your main packaging activity would be. So it's not always going to be the same as what's on Companies House. And again, that helps with some of our auditing capabilities. Packaging activity, you are expected to state what your primary activity is. There should only be one primary activity. You may do several activities, but you need to say which one's your primary activity. Online marketplaces, I can actually see there were some questions about online marketplaces in the chat. So in EPR, an online marketplace is an organisation which owns an online marketplace that facilitates non-UK organisations to sell packaged goods into the UK. So if you have an online marketplace, if you have an online system where you sell your own products, say your own branded products in the UK, and they're your products, you'll be responsible for reporting them as, say, a brand owner or a pack filler, but you aren't responsible as an online marketplace. As Mark said, it's really important if you could just read through the guidance and just assess which activity against which packaging you're reporting is the most relevant, and that's how you should report it. Turnover and total tonnage, again, these the turnover needs to be in millions to decimal places, and total tonnage. So I think someone else said, why are we doing things in kilograms on your packaging file, whereas other things are in tons? For your organisation file, we would like you to put it, well, you need to put it in tonnage, not in kilograms. So yeah, you need to put your total tonnage in and record it in whole tons. Please make sure your addresses are correct. Quite a few people have been using various addresses, say a distribution address or something like that. We need you to include your registered address on Companies House if you're a limited liability partnership or a limited liability company or a limited partnership, or you can do your head office or principal place of business, unless it's what I was just talking about. And we also need a service of notice address if it's different from the registered address. So if you need a service of notice, so for a non-compliance notice or something like that, we need to know where the best place is to send that. If you are a brand owner, supply things under your own brand, as Mark covered, you have to submit another file which provides your brand information. So again, there's lots of guidance about this, about how to make your brand file, how to make another file, which is if you're a partnership, there's a file for that as well. And all these instructions are on the gov.uk website. So I'd really implore you to have a look at those and see which ones will be relevant to yourselves. If we go on to the next slide, this is about when we're doing data checks on your packaging data. So as Mark alluded to, there are lots of different kind of things you need to report under. So packaging type, packaging class, packaging function. There's all these different things that you need to report under, and you need to report them as accurately as reasonably possible. So some of the common findings that we've been seeing in the 2023 data is self-managed organisation waste. This is where you collect packaging data, collect packaging waste, you collect it, and then you send it for recycling. This has been omitted from quite a few people's submissions. It is a requirement of the regulations, so we need to include that information. And again, it needs to be accurate as reasonably possible. So if you have a methodology on kind of breaking down how much materials have been collected and sent for recycling, you just need to have that documented so that we can check it should we come out to audit or query the data. So it's self-managed organisation waste. So then reusable packaging. This should only be reported on first supply, as Mark said. We've had people kind of reporting it several times. You only need to report it the first time it's used. But you do report it twice in your packaging report. One is reusable packaging, and again, separately is either household or non-household, but it should only feature once. So if you use it multiple times, say 3 times, just do it on the first time. The second and third time, you shouldn't need to report that. The weights of drink containers versus units reported. So you report the number of drinks containers you've supplied, and you report the weight of that. We've had a lot of instances where kind of it doesn't make sense. Say someone's just supplied 10 units, but they've put 100 tons. So that's not right. So you need to do it per bottle that's been supplied. So you just need to kind of think about making sure they're correct. Household versus non-household packaging, where we, as Mark said again, household packaging should only be primary shipment packaging. Non-household would be secondary and tertiary, and some primary shipment packaging. But we're having instances where people have misreported some of that. So we want to make sure people are really clear on the guidance on that. So there is specific guidance on defining household versus non-household packaging. So again, please refer to that. It's on gov.uk. Kilograms to tonne errors, because in the 2007 packaging regulations, which many of you may be obligated under, the reporting is in tonnes, and it has changed now to kilograms under EPR. So obviously I think there's been a bit of a hangover where people are still reporting in tonnes, but we need to be reporting in kilograms. Where this has been quite obvious on data templates, we have gone back to producers just to query that. So if you have done it wrong, we maybe come back to you and querying it, but please make sure to get it right for your 2024 reporting. Inconsistent packaging activities. The activities that you report should kind of align with your organisation data. So if you've said that you're a brand owner in your organisation data, we'd expect you to be reporting under the brand owner activity in your packaging data. So again, we do checks across your report. So if you could just make sure that they align, that would be great. And then incorrect classification of packaging categories and activities. I'd say extensive guidance on the gov.uk website. We also have an agreed positions document on NPWD. I'm sure Jude will share the link. But I can see there's been a few questions in the chat about, you know, certain packaging items. Is this packaging or is it not packaging? Is it primary? Is it not? There's a lot of really detailed guidance in the agreed positions document. It is about 50 pages long. It's got a lot of detail, but there is a handy bit, content, so you can pick the bits that you want to kind of read into. But I would really implore you to have a look at that and just see if your answers answered within that. As I say, always look at the guidance first. If you're still not quite sure on a compliance question, please contact your relevant regulator. I say, if you're in England, please contact the Environment Agency. If you are a member of your of a compliance scheme, I really encourage you to also go to your compliance scheme first as well, because they can answer a lot of these questions. There is a register of compliance schemes that you can use, again on NPWD. I'll ask Jude if she can share it with you guys. So if you are wanting to become a member of a compliance scheme and want to know who is currently kind of registered, then you can look at that list. I think that's all from me, but yeah, I'll pass over back to Jude.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask if we can stop sharing the slides. And so thank you to our speakers. Thank you to everyone who asked questions up front, so that we did get some questions when you registered. They helped us to prepare for the webinar, so hopefully some of those have been answered. I'm also going to just pick up on a few of them just to make sure that they're covered. Yes, the slides and recording will be shared. Fundamentally, that will go out, and there will be useful links that have been referred to, so that will all happen. I'm going to try. I've got 10 minutes to do quick fire questions. So starting from the top, you've mentioned and you've been talking about the data that large producers need to submit. What are the differences for small producers? Are there any, or is it just because it's been large producers submitting data so far? So that's what you're referring to.
Oh, I think this is going to go to me, isn't it? Or will it go to Peter?
I was going to say, Mark, do you want to talk through what small producers have to report, and then Virginia, you can talk about any likely errors.
So the data sets are effectively the same. At the moment, we're not onboarding small producers into RPD. We will be doing that soon, and we'll let you know when that is live. Process is going to be similar. You'll need to enroll and create an account, and you will upload a CSV file in a similar way to what we've discussed on this call. The difference, of course, here is for small producers, that isn't due for 2024 recording and submission until the window that closes on the 1st of April 2025. So you will submit 12 months of data on one CSV file. The methodology will be very similar to what we've discussed today. However, be aware we are developing and kind of adding to that user journey as we speak. It should be open later this year. Does that answer your question, Jude?
I mean, I think it answers the question. You have to bear in mind these are not my questions.
Just on that, while we're thinking about size of producers, we also had a question about how do you have to prove if you're not big enough to report? So do you need them to provide evidence that they're producing under 25 tonnes or whatever it is?
That one's definitely a question for you, Virginia.
Yeah, there you go. That's fine. Yes, we would encourage, like, organisations should have, really the regulations do apply to all organisations, because there is a requirement to undertake that threshold assessment to see if you meet the threshold. And we would expect all organisations to check if they meet the threshold. We have got people coming out on audits, and we will be following up with with organisations that we think probably close to the threshold, just to check that they're keeping that in check, to make sure that they haven't suddenly tipped over into the threshold for small or large producers. So yes. So just to say, so for those who are registered under the 2007 regulations, we know some people will now have dropped out of obligation because the point of obligation has changed slightly. So we know some people who were obligated under them are now no longer obligated. So it's really worth checking to make sure that you are still obligated. And if so, look at all the obligations that are relevant to you.
Great. Oh, Mark?
I was just going to add to Virginia's response there, just with a practical consideration of, if you've done that assessment and you're confident as an organisation you don't meet the small producer threshold, there's no need to enrol an account into RPD to demonstrate that. It will be on Environment Agency colleagues and other regulators to do what they would normally do around checking and enforcing. You only need to enrol on report package and data where you have an obligation to declare.
Great, thank you. So one quick question that I think has been covered anyway, but just to reinforce it, that does this apply to all businesses? For example, non-food. Generally, everybody always thinks about food, but it is beyond that. Is everybody nodding heads? Good. Does this include packaging on items that are given away? So, for example, promotional items as well as those sold?
Yes, it does.
Great. Good answer. Thank you.
There's a regulation 10 in the data reporting regulations, gives you the definition of supply. And within that, it gives you, things given away for free, given away as prizes. It's all obligated. Yeah.
And we also had a question about carrier bags, whether they're classed as packaging. And I know we talk about this lots in the office, so I'm just going to run it past
It's so interesting because I've been having debates about this recently, and it's really fun. I saw that question come up. What I would ask is if people can go, the agreed position document that I referenced when I was talking before has a massive table in the back of it. I think it's appendix 3 or 4, and it goes through lots of really specific examples of so carrier bags is in there, candle jars are in there, blood bags are in there. There's all kinds of weird and wonderful examples that we've had, and we've built that table over time. Some of it's a carryover from the 2007 regs, some of it's brand new. So I'd really implore people to look at that. I don't know what we decide. Like, again, carry bags is a tricky one because obviously there's different types of carry bags, so I can't be too prescriptive in my answer right now, but I would implore people to go and have a look at that. With the agreed positions document, we're already on version 4. We hope to have version 5 out in the next month. So I would really, again, implore people to have a look at when that's got updated, because I know, as I say, I've been discussing carry bags recently. I believe we're going to update some of the wording around the agreed position on carry bags. So just please keep a lookout for that.
Brilliant. Thank you. I love the conversations that we have. They're all so interesting. So one question, I'm going to start with you, Virginia, if that's okay. So we know that large producers will need to pay EPR fees. Do medium and small producers pay as well?
So as kind of Mark alluded to before, so organisations are either not obligated, a small producer or a large producer, as per those kind of thresholds that he covered. So organisations check if they meet the criteria, either small or large. Small organisations need to register annually, which will have a fee associated with it. And that fee goes to the regulator, and they'll report annual data when the main regulations come in. A large producer has to register annually with a fee, report data twice a year, and pay the disposal fee, and will have recycling obligations. So if you're a small producer, you just need to pay your registration fee, and which are outlined in the main regulations, which have been, I'm going to send you a link to that, Jude, so you can share the charges.
Good, thank you.
But yes, if that answers your question, I think.
Yep, that does answer my question. That's great. So which regulations are applicable for companies that are not based on the UK market but sell their products into the UK? Virginia, this was one of the last ones on the pre-submitted questions.
Oh, okay. So under EPR packaging, your class is carrying out. Oh, it feels like you're talking about the online marketplace activity here, because basically you're either an input. So you've got kind of as Mark covered, there's about 7 or 8 different functions. If you could be an importer, so if you are importing things from somebody outside the UK, you're responsible as the importer. But again, there are nuances around that, so please read the guidance. But then there's the owning the online marketplace activity. So if you operate a website or app that allows non-UK businesses to sell their goods into the UK, you are an online marketplace under EPR. So you are responsible for the packaging going through, kind of being facilitated coming into the UK. So you need to check, but you also might be doing other activities. So I think, as Mark alluded to, you could be doing that, but then you could be also selling your own goods under your own brand. So you could also be a brand owner. So it's just, as I say, I'm always going to point to the guidance because there's a lot there.
That's absolutely fine. That's great. I've got a question so does a third-party contract manufacturer or packer have reporting responsibilities? So where they don't manufacture their own products or sell directly to end user, and they might just be packing on behalf of somebody else where they're given free issue packaging material, are they obligated? Do they have reporting responsibilities?
It depends. That's the classic answer, isn't it? I can't remember this. I don't know if this is a question that's just come out just now, or whether it was a
It did just come in, yeah.
Oh, okay. Can I take that one away? Because we have responded to a lot of queries around that, because we've got toll manufacturers, we've got, if you're doing things for people overseas, if you don't own the packaging, and if it's a UK company who gives you the packaging to fill, but you don't take ownership of it, then the person who it's all about who owns the packaging, basically, as who's responsible. But there is some nuances about overseas things, so I would want to take that away, if that's okay.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm more than happy for you to take it away, and we will just make sure that we get an answer from you that we can share back.
I think we've got quite a few specifics, haven't we? So specific questions that maybe we'll pass over to you, Virginia, and Mark and Peter, so you can have a look and pull up some answers for. I've got an easy question, hopefully. Say easy because I think I know the answer to it, so I'm hoping therefore it is quite straightforward. But just a clarification on different materials. So someone asked whether compostable and biodegradable packaging would be classed as other. My answer is yes, but I want to check that I'm saying the right thing.
I'm going to say it depends again, because we have a new category called fibre-based composites.
Oh, yes.
So some of that will probably come under fibre-based composites now. So I think in the past, a lot of that would have been other under the 2007 regs. But because we have a new category of fibre-based composites, if it does contain fibres, I think I'd have to get the definition out of fibre-based composites. But I think there will be some moving into that category. So just be wary of that.
That makes perfect sense.
Okay. Mark, you've got your hand up.
I just wanted to note, and I don't know if that's the close of the questions, but we often get this when we do public events, Virginia and I. So when we get a lot of users in a room together, we get these very detailed questions. They're always very difficult to answer in this environment, but it's just a plea to those asking the questions. Don't be strangers in the meantime. You don't have to save them for an event where Virginia, Peter or I are there, either through the help desk if it's IT related, or directly through the individual regulator that you're dealing with. Part of the stuff that we put on this slide deck and the helpful links that we're going to send out, please engage early, whether it's with the IT side of things or with the regulators. They'll be able to then, particularly with those operability questions, Virginia, I know you guys like to triage them. You often have additional questions to ask. The often in this environment, unfortunately, is often depends, isn't it?
Yes. Can I just expand on So the DEFRA service desk would say, yeah, definitely IT issues. If you have a question or comment about the policy itself, around anything like policy related, that would go to the DEFRA service desk as well. And anything on scheme administrator or the fees. So I think there's been quite a few questions about fees. That would go to the DEFRA service desk because that's not really dealt with by the regulators. So as I say, we'll take on compliance. The DEFRA service desk will take on IT, policy and fees, if that's okay.
Right. That is absolutely perfect. And I think that is the perfect time to wrap it up. So thank you all for speaking and for answering the questions that you could so brilliantly. We will download all of the questions that have been submitted and try and work out how we best get the answers from you to reply to them. Thank you to everybody who's attended and listened and asked the question. Hopefully this will have been useful and interesting. Please feel free to listen back if you have any more kind of like, if you missed bits of it. But we will endeavour to answer all of those, well, as many of those questions as we can, not necessarily all of them, depends what they are, and get that out to you with the slides and a recording as quickly as possible. So thank you very much, panelists. You were, as always, absolutely brilliant. I look forward to doing it sometime soon.
Jude, Alice, thank you for inviting us. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Jude.
Thank you very much.
See you later. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Absolute joy. Bye.